So, psychedelics use and metaphysical beliefs, worldview generally, and well-being as well. So, we know that psychedelics have been used in various cultures since prehistory. Here is a mushroom stone from the Maya culture, from the beginning of the Common Era. And psychedelics have been embedded in spiritual contexts in the West as well. So there are many prominent examples of this. Huxley's Doors of Perception, where he interpreted his mescaline experience in terms of Zen Satori, enlightenment experience. We all know about Walter Pahnke's studies on mysticism, psilocybin experiments. And Huston Smith has defended a kind of psychedelic perennialism, where psychedelics induce mystical type experiences which he considers to afford access to spiritual or metaphysical truths that cannot be otherwise accessed. And in the more psychological or psychiatric context, Stan Grof has defended this perennialism tied to transpersonal psychology, where the spiritual aspects are considered as central for human flourishing and well-being. Bill Richards from Johns Hopkins considers this, he talks about sacred knowledge, which he considers to be central in psychedelic-assisted therapy generally. And there are many examples of this kind. So what are we talking about here? It's worldview, spirituality, and metaphysics. So worldview can be defined as the lens through which we see the world. So it defines our perceptions of reality, our beliefs about reality. It can include implicit and explicit components. And spirituality is a type of worldview where belief in some kind of transcendental reality or something ideal, sacred, is central. And metaphysical beliefs are a person's implicit or explicit beliefs about the fundamental nature of reality. And importantly, they are abstract and non-verifiable or falsifiable theses. So in this sense, they are always sort of matter of taste, one could argue. Of course, philosophers disagree about this, and lots of discussion about this. So in this pyramid here, this is how I see it. So there, on the most fundamental level, we have our most fundamental beliefs. In the cognitive system, our fundamental beliefs about the reality. And worldview can be considered to be like based on metaphysical beliefs. Worldview is more specific. So the higher we go, the more specific and fluctuating beliefs are in question. So worldviews can also include political opinions, of course, and many other kinds of more specific beliefs, which then we have like on the top, we would have like basically this moment here, what we experience from moment to moment, our perceptions of reality, specific beliefs and interpretations of the world. This is like a cognitive hierarchy where the fundamental beliefs are on the bottom. And in terms of predictive processing, you could say that these fundamental beliefs correspond to high-level priors. And then the higher, these more like fluctuating experiences correspond to low-level priors, which guide how we perceive reality from moment to moment. So well-being, worldview, and spirituality, what is their relationship? The role of spirituality in human well-being is emphasized in, for example, transpersonal psychology. Here we see Abraham Maslow. And transpersonal psychology is often tied with a type of perennialism, which holds, it's a philosophical position basically, that all world religions share a common core. And it emphasizes mystical type experiences as a way to access these kinds of spiritual or metaphysical truths. And also more generally, spiritual practices and beliefs are associated with well-being. There is lots of research on this. The effect sizes are not so terribly large, but the effect is quite robust and consistent. this is a recent meta-analysis by Yaden et al., where this association was found. It's a meta-analysis. I might note at this point that, for example, Stan Grof, who defends transpersonal psychology, it includes his view of transpersonal psychology includes these perennial metaphysical ideas about the fundamental nature of reality, which could be considered as some kind of like, a bit like in Vedanta philosophy, Brahman, or some kind of cosmic consciousness or God that underlies everything that exists. And these are metaphysical ideas, non-verifiable or falsifiable. But Stan Grof also has these other types of ideas which are more like, for example, this perinatal and this birth trauma and all these kinds of quite controversial ideas, which I consider as non-metaphysical because basically they could be in principle empirically falsified. So what we are talking about here is basically transformation. So what is it that changes in a psychedelic transformation? Not all psychedelic experiences are transformatory, but when we consider a transformation, something changes. And what is it? People sometimes speak of an ontological shock, like a radical change in how we perceive reality and how what we take to be the fundamental nature of reality. And that leads us to focus on metaphysical beliefs. So now more specifically on this topic, metaphysical belief changes and psychedelics. One early study, Lerner and Livers, found that psychedelics use was associated with belief in a universal soul, unity of all things, illusory nature of physical existence, and the existence of a transcendental reality. And these are like these mystical type metaphysical beliefs. And they compared basically psychedelic users with alcohol users, if I remember correctly. So it was a cross-sectional study. Timmerman here on top found an increase in non-physicalist beliefs, NPB, with their own questionnaire. So psychedelic use was, there were two kinds of studies which they reported. One was longitudinal naturalistic, where psychedelic use was like increased these non-physicalist beliefs, and they also had a randomized controlled trial with a control group. So this is evidence of a causal relationship between psychedelics use and change in metaphysical beliefs. And this increase in non-physicalist beliefs was also associated with well-being. And then we have Nayak and Griffiths, who found in retrospective design self-rated increase in panpsychist beliefs. So in this study, they recruited participants with the announcement that they should report a belief psychedelic experience. So it was a like selected sample, and then the participants then evaluated in retrospect how they consider their beliefs to have changed as a result of the experience. So it was their own evaluation of what had changed as a result of that belief-changing experience. And they found an increase in panpsychist beliefs. And then Nayak et al. Utilized with a broader set of questions, and they found increase in dualist beliefs and paranormal or spiritual beliefs and panpsychism. And these are factors from a factor analysis from a large pool of items. Previous research has limitations. So, for example, Timmerman's non-physicalist beliefs, they include a wide range of metaphysical positions. Obviously, non-physicalist beliefs from a philosophical perspective is not a philosophical position at all. It's just a negation of all that is physicalistic. And Nayak et al. Conflated metaphysics and the paranormal. Of course, they didn't explicitly focus on metaphysics. They focused on all kinds of beliefs, but they were still kind of these like spiritual or metaphysical flavored beliefs. So for example, they had items that it is possible for some people to predict future events, or some people such as shamans, gurus, psychics are able to influence physical events through non-physical processes. So these are not metaphysical beliefs because telekinesis or telepathy or things like this, they are paranormal basically, and they have been studied in parapsychology, and there is no consistent evidence that these kinds of things would be possible, and they basically violate natural laws as well. If there would be something non-physical affecting the physical, it would violate the causal closure of the physical. So these are problematic if you consider Chris Leatherby's comforting delusions argument. So that argument applies to these beliefs because they can be falsified or verified. But in contrast, metaphysical beliefs cannot be falsified or verified. So in this sense, they are epistemically innocent. I would argue in that way. Including naturalism is, that's a metaphysical thesis and you cannot prove it right or wrong. So in the present study, the research questions were, what is the structure of metaphysical beliefs in participants with experience of psychedelics? Secondly, what is the relationship between past psychedelic use, metaphysical beliefs, and well-being? So what we did, we devised this questionnaire. We have titled it Core Metaphysical Beliefs because we consider this to be like on the fundamental level of the cognitive system. 42 items on a wide range of metaphysical beliefs, including belief in an ultimate nature of reality, a positive nature of this ultimate reality, materialism, dualism, scientism, monism, idealism, panpsychism, teleology, free will, simulationism. Simulationism is quite a modern view related to idealism, where whether everyday reality is considered as a kind of dream or simulation, not really real. And then we measured features of a single most meaningful psychedelic experience in the participants' past, which we call the experience. And we assessed it in retrospect with Psychological Insight Questionnaire and Mystical Experience Questionnaire. And then we asked about frequency of past psychedelic use, including like how many times they have overall used psychedelics, time since last use, average use, how much they use on average psychedelics, how often basically, and average dose. And well-being and ill-being were assessed with Warwick Edinburgh well-being scale and peace of mind scale. These are positive aspects of well-being, and then depression and anxiety for ill-being. So I cannot go into detail into this core metaphysical beliefs, but there is just a sneak peek into what we had. So there were like these 3 items per metaphysical idea. We didn't expect these to form factors in factor analysis, but these were just like guiding principles. 14 metaphysical constructs, and the persons rate whether they agree or disagree with these statements. So we administered this survey through the crowdsourcing service Prolific. Sample size was a bit more than 600 after exclusions. So, for example, polydrug use was a basis for exclusion. And participants were from a range of countries and cultures, South Africa, UK, Poland, and many other countries. So now we go to the results. First, structure of metaphysical beliefs, which was examined in a factor analysis, confirmatory and exploratory. Exploratory first and then confirmatory. So factor analysis revealed only 2 main factors, idealism with 7 items and materialism with 8 items. Here are some examples of idealism. All there exists is forms of consciousness. Love is the fundamental nature of reality, which is this like positive aspect, positive belief about the nature of fundamental reality. And that was the only one which was like this positive, more substantial or descriptive item. And then there were also these like dualistic items, like mind and matter are distinct aspects of reality. We can discuss how this should be then interpreted interpreted. And then materialism was this kind of basic materialism. Science can reveal all there is to know about reality, and it's noteworthy that this first item, which was the driving item for the factor, it's basically scientism. It's not ontological materialism. So science, like this epistemological scientism and ontological physicalism were conflated in this materialism factor. And then the next research question, past psychedelic experience or frequency of use, and metaphysical beliefs and well-being and ill-being. So we used network and mediation analysis to examine the interrelations between these different constructs. So Gaussian graphical model, Andreas Krappe, my student, did this analysis. So here we have basically, here are the positive well-being measures. This is like the Warwick-Edinburgh well-being scale, peace of mind, depression and anxiety. So these well-being and ill-being measures form the cluster. They are highly correlated, like negatively correlated well-being and ill-being, obviously, as one could expect. Then we have idealism factor from the Metaphysical Questionnaire and materialism factor. And then we have, in this model, we have MEQ and PIQ, mystical experiences and psychological insights during the experience. So what we see here is that psychological insight during the past experience was associated with their current endorsement of idealism. And there was also weak association directly from psychological insight to well-being, but this link from idealism to well-being is stronger. And psychological insight during that past experience, it was about 2 years ago on average, it was associated positively with idealism. So those are the main associations. And one noteworthy thing is also that PIQ and MEQ, the psychological insight and metaphysical feature, mystical type features during the experience were like really highly correlated. It was something around 0.6. And then we had another network model for these frequency-related variables. So here we have, these are again these well-being and ill-being measures which form this cluster as expected. And then we have this time since last year's TIM and frequency, which is this overall frequency, how many times they have used psychedelics, negatively correlated as one could expect, but they were isolated. They were not associated with anything. And dose was excluded from this analysis because many people didn't know what their dose was. So it was unreliable data, lots of missing data. But average use, where they there, how much they use psychedelics on average, how often, that was associated with idealism, endorsement of idealism at the present moment, and like negatively associated with materialism. And idealism was positively associated with well-being. So we see this link from past psychedelic use through idealism to well-being, similarly as in this other slide here, from psychological insight during the past experience through idealism to well-being. So it appears that there might be this mediating relationship here. So that's why we then did this mediation analysis, which was non-planned, to answer whether idealism mediates a link between psychedelic use and well-being. And also we included in this analysis this non-physicalist beliefs from Timmerman to see whether idealism in particular is important or whether it's just non-physicalist beliefs generally. So here's the first model with these acute measures, PIQ and MEQ. So there are lots of associations here, but only idealism is associated with well-being. So these acute features of the experience, insight and mystical features, they predict both non-physicalist beliefs and idealism, but it's only idealism which was associated with well-being. And only this route was statistically significant, from psychological insight through idealism to well-being. And then in this frequency model, we also saw that average use is associated with both non-physicalist beliefs and idealism, but only this route from average use through idealism to well-being was significant. So idealism mediates the link between past psychedelic use and well-being. And there is no direct link between past use of psychedelics and well-being. It's only mediated through idealism. So what to take home from this is that although we had a wide range of metaphysical beliefs in this study, there were only two factors that emerged, idealism and materialism, which were negatively correlated. Idealism could reflect this like perennialistic type metaphysical spiritual beliefs, and they could be like relevant for the long-term positive effects of psychedelic experiences. And one thing interesting here is that it was psychological insight that predicted idealism and not mystical type features, contrary to expectations. It could be because PIQ is explicitly focused on insights and MEQ is more focused on the general phenomenology of the experience, not insights in particular. And also it's important that we pay attention, not just to, that we shouldn't use this like the notion of non-physicalist beliefs in general, but instead focus on more like specific metaphysical theses like idealism, which is like linked to well-being, unlike non-physicalist beliefs. So I'm just repeating myself in that point. But of course, we need to carry in mind that this is cross-sectional study, and we need to have a longitudinal experimental design to see what kinds of metaphysical beliefs could underlie these kind of like psychedelic transformations. And I conclude now by saying that Peter Sjöstedt-Hughes has argued that it might be important to consider metaphysics and philosophy in integrating psychedelic transformative experiences. People might not be able to make sense of these experiences without the help of philosophy. So philosophy might have a role in integrating psychedelic experiences. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Super inspiring. If we go into the realms of speculation a bit, continuing from that, why do you see it is specifically idealism that mediates the connection of these experiences and well-being? Do you think it's the most convenient kind of like a shorthand explanation, or metaphysical kind of like a explanatory tool for people to grasp these experiences, or kind of like domesticate these experiences into their everyday lives, and see, or how do you see it? What is it in materialism that kind of like doesn't do that?
Yeah, a good question. I think in relation to what Max Wolf was saying yesterday, that this kind of like, well, it's quite intuitive if you think about it. Of course, I really don't know this idealism factor, what it means. It could be influenced by cultural factors, like people who are inclined towards idealism, they might just use more psychedelics, and they might also have better well-being. But we should note here that materialism was not associated basically with almost anything. So that's the like baseline way to see the reality. And idealism forms this kind of like separate factor, negatively correlated with materialism. I don't know, my own hypothesis is that when a person has a mystical type experience, they feel that they have access to something real and truly existing. They feel that they see the nature of reality, which is something positive, and it's quite natural to assume that that is then could lead to better well-being. I don't know if that answers your question. We can continue.
We can continue later. Thank you very much again, Jussi.